Sustainable Entrepreneurship in Nepal. Namaste Satyaharu, Mero naam Dan Bahadur. Hello everyone, my name is Dan Wright, and I want to welcome you to this year's TEDxJamal. Today I'm going to talk to you about entrepreneurship in Nepal, and my specific focus is on what we've learned from experience over the last couple of decades, and how that will be important in the future as we focus on sustainability and protecting the environment. It's crucial since the COP26 summit in the UK and the world's collective focus to ensure that we all reach net zero by 2050, and hopefully for most of us a lot sooner than that. We change the way we approach the current business plan for the new startups to focus on our own more sustainable approach to the products we produce and the work we do. How can we do that? Well, one of my first startups was an adventure agency called Spirit of Adventure Journeys, and our tagline was, "It's all about the journey." That's never been more true and more important than now, and here's a little explanation of why that's the case. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about myself and my time in Nepal. I first came to Nepal in 1997 at the age of 18 to teach English in a school in Cottagewar on the edge of the ring road. I lived with a Brahmin family, and the three sons became my three brothers, who gave me my first education about Nepal. On that same first visit, I was lucky enough to be able to accompany an Anglo-American expedition to the north face of Kanchenjunga, where I really fell in love with the mighty Himalaya and mountaineering in general. I had my first encounter with the Yeti, but that's a story for another time. I nearly saw a snow leopard, and they've become a lifelong obsession since then. I then left Nepal and returned to the UK, where I did a bachelor's degree in outdoor and environmental education, whilst serving in the UK Army Reserves and the artillery. Upon completion of my degree and a medical discharge in the Army, I returned to Nepal to work as a canyoning guide for one of the leading adventure tour operators, and I was lucky enough to live along the banks of the Boticosi for several months. Here I had my first encounter with the Nepali wild honey, which is another story for another time. From 2001 to 2008, I travelled backwards and forwards using my 5-month visa allowance every year to explore, work, volunteer, learn about Nepal and its fascinating culture and history. In particular, I was drawn to the natural history of this region. For me, beetles, butterflies, plants, ethnobotany, geology, and every other ology, I've spent time getting to know what Nepal has to offer. In 2009, I met my later-to-be wife, Najala Tamraka, who was the Nepal national mountain bike champion at that time. After marriage, we moved to the Middle East, where our son was born. His Western name is Percival, and his Sanskrit name is Parshuram. We then left to the UAE to move to Nepal to set up our own trekking company, and our daughter was born in Kathmandu. Her name is Aurora, and in Sanskrit, Aura. So you can clearly see that I really like Nepal, and it's now a quarter of a century that Nepal has been in my life. So let's begin by talking about waste. It was in these early years that I really began to meet small businesses and entrepreneurs around Nepal. Many people took the initiative to use money earned from working abroad to set up their own business in this country. Whilst a lot of these businesses were very successful, it was very apparent to me that a major problem with them was how wasteful they were. Trekking and tea houses would use enormous amounts of wood cut from the landscape to boil water for tourists to have hot showers. Expeditions would carry literally tons of supplies up mountains and then simply abandon everything left over and the rubbish when they were finished. Export companies shipping Tibetan antiques and a wide variety of Nepalese handicrafts would use endless reams of plastic bubble wrap to protect the products that they were shipping. 20 years ago, there was really very little concern for the environment and for the waste that went into our industry as a whole. Nepal thrived on tourism, and nothing was ever too much trouble in the endless competition between the companies to ensure repeat business and to attract new travellers. Everywhere you looked in Kathmandu, plastic waste lined the streets and was burned in the evenings, which added to the all-pervading smog that descended on our capital city in the last 30 years or so. Nepal wasn't always like this, though. Historically, until the 1980s, there were no real disposable plastics in Nepal. In fact, it was culturally correct to throw your rubbish onto the street. This was because most rubbish items, like natural banana leaf plates for fast food that once you'd eaten the food were thrown on the floor, the cows and the buffaloes were then free to roam everywhere. You used to hoover these up as a food source. The big problems then came with the advent of plastic disposables, which were still thrown on the floor when finished with, and cows still ate them, but they caused massive problems to their digestive systems. It also made for a very unsightly mess everywhere of unrecycled plastics. Glass bottles from the soda industry, never really a big issue in Nepal. All bottles from soda brands are collected in crates and returned to the factories to reuse. However, beer bottles have been increasingly an issue, and it was often normal to simply take crates of beer bottles out of villages and high trekking areas and break them down and put them into landfill. It's all very well documented how much of an impact big expeditions have had on especially the high mountain environment. And until the garbage deposit was brought into effect by the Nepal government, many simply left all their rubbish, including tents and equipment like oxygen cylinders, on the mountains because it was more expensive and too much trouble to remove them. Now let's explore some initiatives. Out of every adversity and problem comes great ideas. Nepal is full of ingenious people who can come up with simple ideas to solve big problems and make money in the process. Rubbish that was once accumulated on the banks of the Bagmati became big business in Nepal. Everything was collected and recycled. Some things were melted down, some repurposed materials were collected, turned into rags, cheap clothing, plastic bottles, cans, tins, in fact, anything that could be sold for scrap were meticulously sorted. The waste of the big cities in Nepal became a big industry. Lots of people made money from it. This reuse, recycle, reinvent mentality soon spread to the villages and tourist areas. Locals started to make handicrafts from waste materials. Collective groups of women or prisoners or marginalized societies would set up cooperative-style businesses and then sell their products both in Nepal and abroad. You can turn old tires into flip-flops, and sweet wrappers can be folded and made into Christmas decorations using origami patterns. Old saris can be cut up and made into reusable sanitary towels. Bottles can be cut in half and used as drinking glasses. Rice sacks can be resewn into handbags. The list is endless. The ingenuity is amazing. Now, when you go trekking, you can still get a hot shower, but it comes from solar thermal pipes that store heat from the sun to heat the water. You can get a full 3-course dinner in a tea house, but instead of burning firewood, they use biogas, and the byproduct of burning this methane is water and fertilizer. You can charge your mobile phones and other gadgets using electricity from micro-hydro dams. You can light your rooms at night using solar panels and LEDs, and in some places, you'll start to see wind generators and other novel ways to generate sustainable power. The key to all this is affordability. Nepalis don't earn a lot of money in Nepal, and Western solutions to local problems are inherently expensive. The Nepal government has backed several important initiatives over the years, including biogas converters and micro-hydro dams. Tourists have also developed friendships with locals on treks and then either sent them money or come back with money to help build sustainable initiatives in the future. Nepali workers also send money home to their villages to enable the communities to install more efficient water sources or connect to the power grid and establish telecom towers to bring mobile networks into remote places. You often have to think out of the box to find simple solutions to everyday problems. What are some ideas that you've seen that particularly struck you as being clever or different to normal everyday companies? New concepts that are spreading all over the world now, like food delivery services from multiple food outlets or car and bike sharing apps. What about companies that cater to a specific need, like all healthy vegetables that are grown locally, or even ready-made meals delivered to your doorstep? Why stay in a hotel when you can download an app that connects you to people willing to let you sleep on their couch for much less than the hotel would cost? All over Kathmandu and Nepal, you can find amazing solutions to everyday problems that people are both developing from open source ideas internationally and setting up themselves. Why not go out for dinner next week in Kathmandu and have robot waiters serve you? I have, and my kids loved it. Or perhaps you aren't great at baking or decorating birthday cakes, so you could simply order one and have it delivered to your doorstep. Where does this all lead us? Last year, I completed a 6-week online course with a reputable university in the UK. The title of this course was The Climate Emergency, and its focus was on ways for businesses to take up the task of aiming for net zero without it costing so much that it puts the company itself at risk. When you consider the carbon footprint of any trekking agency whose clients all have to fly to Nepal, or any tea house who has to find sustainable energy to cater to their guests, or a domestic helicopter tour company, and the list goes on. How do they reduce their environmental impact to achieve net zero, but in a way that isn't going to put them out of business? Let's look at helicopters and how feasible it is for them to achieve net zero carbon emissions. There's a company in Munich that by 2025 will have electric aircraft running a taxi service in the skies with a reach of 300 miles in 1 hour on a full charge. This startup has over $100 million raised so far in investments. According to Morgan Stanley, the market for electric flying cars could be worth $1.5 trillion by 2040. But where will Nepal feature in all this? Will we still be using aviation fuel by 2050 for all our domestic flying? And will our tourists be coming here in aviation fuel jets? And if so, then how can we be expected to reach a net zero target by then? By when do you think we will see the first helicopter tours to Everest Base Camp? Electric helicopters. Partially the answer to this is in offsetting. We can offset our own national carbon footprint through initiatives like producing electricity only through renewable energy sources. Inevitably, prices for tours will have to go up for the price to include a variety of initiatives to offset the carbon used to get here. For example, we can set up tree planting schemes like the one in the 1990s that planted literally millions of trees in the Malamchi Valley area. Potentially, a supplementary tourist tax can be pooled as a financial resource of projects that enable Nepal to lower its domestic carbon footprint. We certainly need a non-governmental think tank to create ideas for the government and for the private sector to act upon. We really need to tap into the pool of knowledge gained by the great brain drain of the 80s and 90s, people who left to work abroad and now return with new ideas. The exciting thing to know is that there are entrepreneurs right now out around us in Nepal already thinking about these problems and finding solutions to them. None of this is new. None of this is a revelation. Nepal already understands that she needs to raise the stakes and find solutions to both the current environmental problems and to the future ones related to finding the path towards net zero. This is a journey that has already begun. But are enough people on this journey? Well, probably not. And that's why today I'm asking everyone out there to consider the question, what can I do to ensure that my personal future actions ultimately help everyone achieve a net zero goal? Well, to begin with, we can all be a little entrepreneurial in our approach to work and life. Look, for example, for solutions to everyday problems, like how to reduce the packaging we get with food, perhaps by buying all our fruit and vegetable from the market and taking our own basket instead of plastic bags. How to recycle as much as possible, and how to reduce our reliance on personal transport when there's so much public transport available. Ultimately, it's likely that by assimilating simple solutions like these into our everyday lives, we'll also be able to save more money, which can then be spent on a better lifestyle. Nepal is a country that has always benefited from a lot of external philanthropy. We seem to have clung on to our third world status as a means by which to get as much charity as possible pumped into us. However, this reliance on others for income is not sustainable. We need to work towards a system in which we can not only be self-reliant, but that we can resolve our problems internally. Yes, we're a long way off from that, but by developing the mindset early on, we can work towards that together. In the future, it's quite likely that as the world succumbs to more and more natural disasters triggered by the climate, this emergency, that other countries will focus inwardly on their own survival, and therefore, we need to develop a robust approach to our own survival. You might ask, why am I touching on such a potentially controversial subject? Well, the answer lies in the mindset. We need to be better entrepreneurs with a stronger focus on where our products come from and how they will get to our consumer. And then ultimately, how will they finish their journey? Consider the journey of a humble packet of homegrown tea leaves, grown in Ilam, dried in someone's spare room, packed in a handmade paper bag, sealed in a plastic bag for freshness, trucked for 12 hours to Kathmandu, bought by a tourist from a shop in Tamil, flown by jet back to their home country, driven from the airport to their house, open for friends to sample one afternoon with a few pictures of the Nepal trip. The packaging is thrown in the bin for collection to go to landfill, the dregs of tea leaves put in a compost heap for the garden. That's quite a journey when you consider its humble origins, and it's pretty easy to work out what the journey of tea leaves will be. Happily, the leaves themselves, more often than not, will end up in someone's compost heap to fertilize their garden. But the packaging, as food waste, is likely to go to landfill, and the simple act of getting the tea from the hillside in Ilam to the flat in London has a huge carbon footprint on its own. This is one example, but what I want to advocate is that for every product of service in Nepal, we consider from now on the entire journey and not just the business to business or the business to customer experience. Yes, it's all about the journey. This is the most crucial concept for you to take away from my talk today. The journey of a product from concept to production to selling, and then what happens next, is a complete process that businesses must take responsibility for in the future. It's no longer enough to ensure that your customer has the best possible experience of your product. You now need to ensure that the rest of the world also has the best possible experience from the end of the life of your product. The fuel that goes in your car and gives off CO2 and other harmful gases, the packaging you use to wrap your organic vegan burger must be biodegradable or reusable or recyclable. The affordable, disposable sanitary towel made from recycled clothing needs to not end its life in landfill. The lead-free natural dyes organic paint that looks so great on your house is wonderful, but the unrecyclable tin it comes in is not so great. The beautifully aromatic coffee from the hills of Nepal that's so popular in Kathmandu cafes and can be used as fertilizer in the garden is a great concept, but the plastic laminated packaging it comes in to preserve its freshness and is ultimately destined for a garbage heap, besides the bagmati, needs a different packaging solution. When we discuss new ideas, business concepts, and write the first business plans of the future, we must be focused on the sustainability of our product or service too. It's crucial that when we budget for costs, we also factor in the whole life cycle of what we're making, producing, creating, etc. Michael Salson from Sprouts World says that sustainability is a journey, not a destination. And I couldn't agree with him more. It's not something that's going to be easy, and it's not the shortcut route. As a business, we need to look inwardly and ask difficult questions about areas such as supply chain and product sources. If we're going to make the claim that our product or service is sustainable, then we better be able to back that up with evidence. It might look great as a marketing tool to say that our product is 100% sustainable, but it's going to look pretty bad if the consumers find out that that's not true. Entrepreneurs and business owners should try to adopt a more Kaizen approach to their products and services. Kaizen is a Japanese word. It means to seek continuous improvement. For example, if I have a biological, biodegradable cellulose plastics, for example, alternative to a plastic part, then I find a way to make that happen. Always approach any concept with the questions, how can I improve that product or service? And how can I make it more environmentally sustainable? Can our product journey be a story? Yes, very much so, and with good reason. Nepal has historically done very well by marketing through storytelling. A knitted hat on a store shelf in America that was mass-produced in China is less likely to fare as well as the same style of knitted hat that was produced by women from a marginalised ethnic group who set up a cooperative in Nepal and sold their products through fair trade. People love a good story, and if it's a story where the underdog has made a success of themselves, then even better. So with this idea in mind, why not create beautiful stories out of the complete, sustainable journeys of your products? If you're making things in support of another product or business, then they too can use your journey as part of their CSR, branding, marketing. Telling your story also serves another function. It creates accountability and makes you transparent to your customers and to the general public. This is critical. No more whitewashing the situation and hiding what you're doing as a company about it. Stand up, speak out, tell people what you're doing, and be proud about it. It might not be enough, but at least you're making an effort, and eventually you'll get it right. So to summarize what we've learned today, the journey towards environmental sustainability and net zero carbon emissions is a journey shared by every business in the world. Nepal is not alone, and we can learn from others' good ideas and mistakes along the way. Ultimately, nobody can do this for us, and we shouldn't rely on or hope for anyone else to do that for us. This is our problem as much as anyone else's, and we can and must take responsibility for solving it in Nepal. Every business, both current and new, should look at new initiatives to ensure that their products and services are sustainable through every stage of their journey, from conceptualization to termination. I encourage you to share resources and ideas to make this achievable, because ultimately, this is a shared problem, and we're all on this journey together. Dhanyabad, namaste, Jai Nepal.